Second generation Fiat Puntos, like the one pictured, have a problem with their taillight assemblies where the coloured filter fades over time, with the result that your red and amber lights are no longer red or amber. As you can see here, the bottom half of the taillight assembly is fine, it's red how it should be, but the upper half of it, the red bits, the taillight and the brake light, are much closer to pink or a sort of orange, and the amber or orange indicator is much closer to a yellow. We could just replace the taillight assembly with a new assembly, but that would cost a lot, and then it would presumably just go and do the same thing after a while. So to get around the whole issue, we're going to replace the relevant bulbs with LED versions, except for the indicator bulbs, which we'll replace with amber coloured standard incandescent ones. We'll talk about that later. I'll talk about the particular LED bulbs to choose in a while, but first we'll just overview removing the taillight assembly for anybody who hasn't done it before on the Punto. They are held in place with two bolts which you need to remove. There's one bolt above the parcel tray and another in the boot space. To get to the bolt above the parcel tray, you need to remove the little plastic panel which covers it. You just do that with using a screwdriver blade or something similar. Then you can see the nut. This is a sort of custom-made proprietary nut. It's 17 millimeters, so you need a 17mm socket and socket wrench. So loosen the bolts with your socket wrench and then undo the bolts by hand once you've got it loose. Undo them very carefully and keep your hand underneath the nut because there's a wall space between the plastic trim of the car and the outside body, and you don't want to go dropping this nut down inside that wall space. You can have a lot of trouble getting it back. And if you do lose it, you'll have trouble replacing it because this proprietary design has this sort of self-centering ring at the bottom of it, which should be a bit tricky to replace. So once you've got the nuts off, the taillight assembly simply pulls out backward. There is a plug which you need to disconnect. And then once the assembly is free and clear, you can put it down, and you then need to unscrew the 4 screws which hold the bulb assembly into the enclosure itself. And then finally you have access to the bulbs themselves. Now the bulbs we're interested in replacing are the top one, which is the tail light, then the brake light, then the indicator bulb. The tail light's a 10 watt incandescent, and the brake and the indicator bulbs are both 21 watts each. All of these bulbs have a socket type, which is a BA15S, by the way. Firstly, the tail light, which we're going to replace with a red LED. Now, with all LEDs, when you're buying LEDs for colored lights, you must buy the correct color LED. Now, this particular unit is replacing an incandescent bulb, which is 10 watts, which isn't that much, so it doesn't want to be too bright. This has 19 50-50 SMDs, which are arranged in such a manner that a bit of the light's projected directly forward and the rest of it is projected sideways, which means that there's a good chance that the enclosure will properly reflect the light rather than having it just concentrated into a single spot in the middle of it. Now for the brake bulb, we want something a bit more serious, and this unit has 4 higher power LEDs for the sort of lateral sideways lighting, and it has a single high-powered Cree-type chip behind a projector lens, which will give us a more focused, brighter light in the area directly behind the car, which, if you think about it, for a brake light is what we want. Now for the indicator, unfortunately, we can't really use an orange or amber LED because, like most modern cars, the Fiat has a bulb failure detection circuitry in it, which ends up flashing the indicators double speed if it thinks that one of them is blown, and that's the case if you put an LED in. You can get around that by installing resistors and mucking around, but in this case our objective is simply to fix the faded rear tail light, and we're not going to get the benefit of the reduced power usage from something like indicators because they're not on all the time. So the easiest thing to do is to just use a amber coated standard incandescent bulb, which are readily available from most auto places or online. So we put the new bulbs in. Remember, the tail light is at the top, the brake light is the second one down, and the indicator bulb is the third one down. The bulb at the bottom, by the way, is either the fog light or the reversing light, depending on which side of the car we're talking about. I'm not bothering to replace either of them because in the case of the reversing light, it's a white light, and in the case of the fog light, the filter's not faded at the bottom in any case. So refitting the taillight assembly is just the same process as removing it in reverse. The only thing I'd recommend is once you've plugged the taillight back into its electrical plug, I recommend testing it at this point just to make sure that everything's electrically okay. What you've seen so far on this video is the right hand taillight assembly. Doing the left one is exactly the same, and I'm not going to show it to you, other than your car, if it's anything like this one, may have a subwoofer installed in such a place that it blocks access to the bolts for the left-hand taillight assembly, which is a pain, but it's not the end of the world. You just need to remove the 3 screws which are holding the subwoofer in place. There's one at its foot at the base, and there's another 2 at the top. You just remove them, and then there's an electrical plug which you disconnect, and then the whole subwoofer just lifts out and you can put it to one side. Okay, at this point we're pretty much done. I'm just going to show you what these new bulbs look like compared to the old ones. In this particular shot, there are the old bulbs fitted, and in this shot the new bulbs are fitted on the left hand side and the old bulbs remain in the right hand side. So if you flick your eye between them, you can see the color difference, even though the camera's not the best quality. And here's a still photo taken on a better quality camera where you can see the differences more clearly. Again, just switch your eye from one side to the other and you can see the difference. And in this final shot, the new bulbs are installed on both sides. Okay, hope this was helpful.